Hey Alejandro, it's so awesome to talk with you again. And in today's talk, we're going to review some of the companies that Berkshire Hathaway has acquired over the years. And I know we both prepared a few companies that we especially reviewed just so we could discuss them today. So with that, Alejandro, if you don't mind kicking us off with the first company that you'd like to talk about.
Hello, guys. Hello, Michelle. Thanks again for having me here. It's an honor. It's a pleasure, and very happy to share all this with you. And today I want to start with Seas Candy. This is a company Mr. Buffett has talked a lot over the years, and it is super interesting. Even though, like, if you measure by market cap, today is not really one of the biggest ones or anything. I mean, it's probably less than 1%. I think thanks to Candy, a lot of the wealth that he has built is comes from this company. And so basically, um, when he started, he just wanted to buy cheap companies that basically you could liquidate and make money. So basically, buy them below working capital. And this is basically all Graham's. But with time, he started studying Phil Fisher and a little influence from Charlie, and he decided to buy Seas Candy for $25 billion, and he was only making 2 billion, which the price to earnings was very high for the moment, considering that interest rates in that moment were fairly high. But what happened with Seas Candy? Seas Candy was a company that didn't really needed much capital to keep growing. Basically, they were so powerful in California that they just kept growing and kept making more profits without extra investing. And the big lesson he learned here was the power of the brand. Before that, I mean, he never thought that much about the brand. He just thought about buying cheap stuff. Now he started thinking about buying great businesses that can compound with time and that didn't require much capital to keep growing. And this is the big lesson in Seas Candy. And the big thing that is going to make you guys think about this is that he mentions that thanks to this, he bought Coke because he learned the power of the brand. So even though Seas Candy doesn't really have much to do with Coke, I mean, apart from sugar, thanks to Seas Candy, he bought Coke. And this is one of the great lessons that you guys as investors should keep in mind when you're looking for companies, and is the power of the brand is very important. And with this, I'm gonna kick it up to Michelle.
And thanks for sharing that lesson. Yeah, I think with See's Candy, didn't Berkshire buy that back in 1972?
Yes,
Yeah. And I
exactly.
know I think I remember reading in some of the Warren Buffett annual letters that he mentioned that they really wanted to stick to that buy price. Like they were not willing to budge from that. But I think he acknowledges a little bit later, like maybe he felt a little bit guilty that he was getting it at a really great price in retrospect. So at the time, he probably thought because of that Ben Graham, wanting to get really low prices. He was very insistent on his price, but later on, I think he admitted that he pretty much got a steal. That if you think about all the cash dividends that See's Candy has given them, and also from the Berkshire annual meeting this year, I'm sure you saw the really long lines for See's Candies, and I didn't get to go on that line because there was just so many other things to see, and also I just figured if I wanted to buy See's Candies, you could actually get that by ordering it through the mail. So you don't have to, necessarily buy it there. Although I know they had like the special editions in the Berkshire meeting because it was the 50th anniversary. So that was kind of fun. But I saw how popular it is. And I think to your point about the brand, it really resonates with a lot of people who have been buying See's Candies over the years. And a lot of the people in attendance were eating like the peanut brittle and also some of the chocolates. And I mean, it's a brand that a lot of people know. I think they know more so on the West Coast because it's from California and a lot of the Western states. But I think it's pretty well known across the country, like many of the other popular candy manufacturers. So I think that, like you said, Buffett did a really great thing by buying and holding on to that company, and its brand has still held a lot of value today. And they don't have to put as much capital into it, right? Like they can kind of just make a lot of money, even though I'm sure some of their input costs went up a little bit with the cost of cocoa and sugar, and with inflation, like everything is going up. But like you talked about, that's a really great lesson to learn from. And it's no wonder that Berkshire still has held on to See's Candies and also Coca-Cola stock. And that's a great point. And the one that I wanted to talk about today is not as much of a happy ending story. This one is about Dexter Shoe Company that was from Maine, which Berkshire Hathaway bought in 1993, and they exchanged about 25,000 Berkshire A shares for that at a value of about $434 million at the time. And even though Buffett thought that this was an amazing deal run by excellent management, like he believed that there's no finer business than this Dexter shoe, because they had some specialty shoes, and they also were some of the suppliers to some of the big department stores like J.C. Penney's and so on. And so Dexter Shoe was this really great shoe company once upon a time. But then, even though Buffett acknowledged this early on, that some people said that, domestic American shoe companies wouldn't be able to compete as well against foreign, cheaply made shoes coming from Asia, it's as if Buffett didn't really see that as much of a threat. Like initially, he seemed to have thought that Dexter Shoe had a competitive advantage that was unique and strong in the US, and that whatever its moat was wouldn't be breached by all the cheaper shoes coming from Asia. But unfortunately, throughout the 90s, as time went on, Buffett realized that Dexter Shoe was losing market value and like market share. And also, it just over time, Dexter ended up not being able to continue staying as strong. And I think in the later 2000s, Dexter Shoe got folded into another business. So I checked Berkshire's subsidiary list, and Dexter Shoe is no longer on there. But you'll see some of the other shoe companies that Berkshire has, like Brooks, the running shoe company, and also Justin's boots, which are like kind of Western style boots. So, Berkshire seems to like shoes. They believe they can find some good businesses among them, but sadly, Dexter Shoe ended up not being among those. And sadly, a lot of people, like almost 2,000 people, lost their jobs in New Hampshire. And he talked about the importance of having a backup plan, like a plan B, if the kind of company you're working for, if they expect certain skills, but then what if that company goes out of business, like sadly what happened to the Dexter Shoe Company, and also some of the previous companies that Berkshire has owned, like the newspapers or the textile mills. And so it's an important question for a lot of us to keep in mind of how can we develop new skills in case the company we're working for ends up, not being around after a few years. And then how can we transition so that our skills remain competitive? Because that's just a lesson learned. As much as Buffett wanted to hold on to those jobs in Maine, and also I think there were some Dexter Shoe operations in Puerto Rico, like they were just not able to continue on after a while. And so in some of the subsequent annual reports that Buffett talks about Dexter Shoe and the lessons he learned, he laments how big of a mistake this was, because over the years, like I think in the 2006 annual letter, he wrote about how the value that Dexter was of Berkshire shares that they used to pay for Dexter, which would have been around 1.6% of Berkshire Hathaway. So he exchanged 1.6% of Berkshire, a wonderful business, for 100% of what became a worthless business. So, that $434 million wasn't just that, because if you compound it over the years, it actually in 2006 became a value of about $3.5 billion. And then a little bit later on, that grew in another annual letter to a value of about $6 billion. And I just calculated now a little bit based on rough estimations, if it's approximately still about 1.6%. It could be a little bit different depending on how many outstanding shares there are now of Berkshire A. But just as a rough estimate, if I take 1.6% of Berkshire's market value today, which is about $684 billion, that's about $11 billion of market cap value that kind of vanished with Dexter Shoe. If you think about that from the time from 1993 through now, like almost 30 years of, you could have had $11 billion, which if they still had that amount of money, that would be equal to almost what they paid for the Allegheny acquisition of $11.6 billion. So to put that in perspective, if they hadn't bought Dexter Shoe, they could have afforded this Allegheny purchase, almost for free kind of thing. And then the other thing is when Berkshire was at its height of its market cap at the end of March this year, they would have been worth $780 billion of Berkshire in totality. So maybe at the height, maximum value, Dexter could have been equal to $12.5 billion. So that's just an important lesson that all of us can learn from Buffett. And I know that might have been a lot of stats and a little bit long-winded, but I hope some of that made sense. And if anyone has a better updated estimate value of Dexter, feel free to let me know, because I didn't go back and double check how much about 25,000 Berkshire A shares would be worth now, but I'm sure it's not hard to calculate. Like you all could probably tell me really easily how much it is, and maybe I'll go back and double check it later, and then maybe I'll insert it into this when I edit this video. But Alejandro, do you want to go on to our next company that you wanted to talk about?
Yes, absolutely. And before that, I also want to mention about what are you saying about Dexter Shoes, but not really about Dexter, more of how Warren and Charlie are just different from everybody, and is that they point out that they made a mistake. I mean, and that helps us understand that we can make mistakes, and that doesn't mean we are dumb or anything. I mean, in investing, you're going to make mistakes, and just having that humility, being the greatest investors of all, is one of the things that just like, I mean, just hard to describe what it makes me feel about this guy. Is just amazing to be so humble, being the best. I mean, I don't see many people out there talking about their mistakes. They always sharing how good they did, but they try to hide from us that they make mistakes. And this is one of the big things I admire about Mr. Buffett.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Humility is so key here to being, a successful investor by like acknowledging our mistakes and doing a post-mortem analysis of what we did well and more importantly, maybe what we didn't do that great. We can always improve. And to your point about staying humble, is they're willing to learn. Like if you're willing to learn from your mistakes and try your best not to repeat them, that's all you can ask of yourself. So yeah, among all those things, like you're so on point. So thank you for that.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah, now I'm gonna talk about my next company I wanted to mention today, and it's Fruit of the Loom. And I'm gonna start with something Mr. Buffett says, which is funny, and he says that we cover the asses of the masses, and that is very, very funny. I mean, coming from him, he mentioned that in few shareholder meetings that he's been, and I mean, it's just, this guy is just too much to me. The big lesson with Fruit of the Loom is that he, as we know, he usually just buys companies and he just keeps the management. I mean, he always says, I don't really know how to run the business. So part of the success of me buying a company is buying the company and just keeping the managers that they love what they do. But different from that, with Fruit of the Loom, this was a company that the moat still there, the brand was there, everything was there, but the management was just mismanaging all the resources, and the company was about to go broke because of this mismanagement. So this time, for again, one of the first times, he just decided to buy the company, put a good management, lower the cost of everything. I mean, they were overspending in stuff that they didn't need to be spending on. And this was one of the times that he turned around. So this was very interesting. And the reason here is that he knew the mode was still intact. So just there's companies that are going through a hard financial era, but if they can keep the mode and they just, like in this case, Fruit of the Loom just had the brand, they have the distribution system, they were just mismanaged. But again, this to me was a super important lesson. Just like look for companies that have the mode. I mean, the thing for us is that we cannot change the management as he did. But I mean, this is a wonderful lesson that I learned from him buying Fruit of the Loom. What do you think
Yeah,
of that,
and
Michelle?
that's a good point. What I also remember learning from Buffett is that you want to be able to buy a company that an idiot could run because someday one will. And I started re-listening to the Berkshire Hathaway annual meeting, and he said he kind of made a joke in the beginning about how, they've had some businesses where some of the managers developed Alzheimer's. So he updated his own quote a little bit. He said, you want to buy a business that a person with Alzheimer's could run. So is it's kind of funny how how important that moat is of in spite of whatever characteristics the management has. Like ideally, you want to have management with integrity and talent. But if they don't, like if it's an idiot or sadly if someone is struggling with dementia or Alzheimer's, like you want to be able to have a business basically that nobody can mess up either on purpose or by accident. So that's how strong the business mode is of things like to your point in the Fruit of the Loom example, or also with Coca-Cola. Again, I know that sometimes they've had great management over the years and sometimes it's just so, but in spite of all that, I mean, Coca-Cola is still one of the popular brands in the world. Even though many of us, like I try not to drink soda if I don't have to, and I just try to drink more healthy things like water or tea. But I still know that Coca-Cola is a strong brand moat for a lot of people, so people still enjoy it. So it's important to make sure that you're buying a strong business that can withstand even changes in management, that if they're not able to direct the company in the best direction, right?
Yes, absolutely. I totally agree with that. And yeah, that's the good lesson that Fruit of the Loom left us.
Right. Yeah, and with Fruit of the Loom, do you feel like that one is one where the power of their distribution network and all the other things that they had set up, how are they compared to say other competitors with kind of clothing? Because when I think of Fruit of the Loom, I think of like socks or underwear or some of those kinds of basics. So I'm wondering, is that kind of their strength in their some of these, not the like say jeans or something, but is it more in that area that they have the most competitive advantages?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, they're definitely in socks, and again, that's why he says we cover the asses of the masses. Definitely, like you said, the distribution system is very, very strong. I mean, the relations with, let's say, Walmart and all the big guys is very strong, and that's something that was there. And also the brand. I mean, it's just the brand is very, very strong in the United States, and that again, power of the brand, like we were talking before with Sis Candy. But just having that distribution is such a big moat because it is not like you can distribute like a software program. You can just basically build it out of your house and just distribute it all around the world. This is a thing that to build it takes years, and this to me with the brand is the two biggest moats that they have.
Okay, that
Yeah.
sounds good. So the other company I wanted to talk a little bit about is Nebraska Furniture Mart. And I would actually say that this is a very different company from Fruit of the Loom, where one of the reasons why I think Buffett bought Nebraska Furniture Mart was because of the strength of the management. So in a business that I don't know as much about the economic characteristics of furniture stores, but it looked like when he met Rose Blumkin, he was just incredibly in awe of how much Mrs. Rose Blumpkin was able to build, and she goes by affectionately Mrs. B. And I talked about her in one of my videos about how Warren Buffett has talked about her as one of the best business managers he's ever had the pleasure of knowing. And there's a lot we can learn from this lady who she worked until age 103, and she sadly passed away at 104. But that's just an incredible life of how she came over as a poor immigrant, and then she was able to, save a lot of money, not like super much, but like enough to start Nebraska Furniture Mart with something like $500, or maybe if it's adjusted for inflation a little bit, it's like $2,500 or something like that. And then she sold Nebraska Furniture Mart to Berkshire Hathaway, 90% of it for $55 million in 1983. And I think that Berkshire eventually bought out the rest, but I'm not sure when they did. But it was incredible how, Buffett said that we didn't need to look at any audit documents. It was just based on a handshake and based on trusting Mrs. B. And he definitely just loved being in business with her and her relatives, and how they taught so many secrets of how to run this business, and basically being the low cost producer of carpets and a lot of furniture. That's some of the secret. And also Buffett talks about some of their other family secrets in some of his annual letters. So I encourage people to go back and read about all of the platitudes that Buffett bestows on the Blumpkin family, because they're just super incredible. And like he says, it's surprising that not more business schools study the Blumpkin family, because they were able to set this amazing example. And Nebraska Furniture Mart is huge, not only in Omaha, but in a few other locations. Like I think it's also in Dallas, Fort Worth, and also Kansas City, and maybe another couple locations in addition to that. But there's something special of what Mrs. B and her family built. So I think we would be all the better, the more of us, we're aspiring investors and business people, and we should definitely try to learn as much as we can about Nebraska Furniture Mart, and also more of the companies that Buffett has invested in. And I think there was one more company you might have wanted to talk about.
I do want to compliment a little with the Nebraska Furniture Mart. Just tell a quick story. And I remember Mr. Buffett saying that one time he went to Mrs. B's house, and she had tags on the sofas and everything, like basically with the price. And the reason is that she wanted to feel at home, and home for her was her Nebraska furniture. This is a very
Like
funny
her
story.
store.
Yeah. So she will have tags on her sofa and everything.
Wow, that's so funny.
Yeah, this is a story.
Yeah.
And yeah, the last company I want to talk about is GEICO, which I think we all know this huge company. He always talks a lot about them. And the big lesson here with GEICO, they just sell insurance, which is a commodity. And Mr. Buffett doesn't like commodities. He knows that when you sell commodities, is just cycles that, like, when there is over consumption, there is a lot of people that just make money. But when demand lowers, there's a lot of people that start going out of business, because in commodities we just have these very low margins, and it's just very hard to have this moat. And the big lesson here is that the only way to have a moat in something like a commodity is being the low cost producer, because when you are the person that produces at the lowest cost, you are able to compete in price, because if your competitors lower their price, you can lower and you still make money. So this is something you guys always have to have in mind. Like, if you're going to go into a commodity business, just try to pick the low cost producer, obviously at a great price. And this is the big lesson that we have with GEICO, which is one of his favorite companies as well.
Yeah. And yeah, GEICO is a great story. I remember also learning about how Buffett visited one of the previous managers of GEICO and in the office on a Saturday morning. And that was, I think, in Washington, D.C. He went down to and learned about it there. And he basically fell in love with companies that he got to know earlier in his life, like GEICO. And to your point about being the low cost producer, like that's really important. And also combining that with the high quality. And we see that in the service that GEICO delivers to their customers. They're all about high quality in a similar way like Costco is, because they're also a low cost producer and offering the wholesale goods. And I think their margins are only something as low as 11% or so, which are among the lowest. And they can do something like offering kind of these grocery and other types of items that in some ways are kind of commodities also, but because they're the low cost producer, but combining that with high quality and very specific goods, like they're not just offering everything, but focusing on special goods and services. I think that's the key to GEICO and also Costco, for example, even though Berkshire doesn't own Costco, but I know Charlie Munger loves Costco, and that's they have that in common of being the low cost producer and high quality. So I think that's a great lesson.
Yeah, I mean that the power, like you said, I mean the power of the brand of GEICO is very big as well. Like they spend a lot of money in marketing, and as long as they are getting a big return on that capital that they spend in marketing, they're gonna keep doing it. I do have GEICO, and it is a great, like you said, a great service. So from
Yeah.
experience, you can talk that, and you can agree that it is a
Yeah,
great
I
company.
agree. And the only other thing though is I wonder about how GEICO will do in the next few years, because I heard at the annual meeting that Ajit Jain talked about how GEICO is somewhat behind Progressive because Progressive has been using telematics for the last 10 years, which is putting like a GPS device in a car to see how people drive. So, I don't know how big of a hole that puts GEICO in terms of innovating, because it's good to be low cost, but then if you're sacrificing research and development and innovation to be able to offer better service in the future, that's something to maybe pay attention to. So I agree that GEICO is great, but I'm sure they want to, try to compete and catch up with Progressive, and hopefully they will do that.
Yeah, absolutely right. You're right. I mean, it has to be investment in research and development.
Yeah. Well, awesome, Alejandro. And we're coming up on our time, and I greatly appreciate talking about all these interesting companies, some which are still part of the Berkshire family and others that unfortunately had to move on from, like Dexter. But all in all, I think that these lessons are really important for all of us in our investing journey. And thank you for talking with me about them.
Thanks to you, Michelle. It was an honor again.
Okay. Have a good rest of your day. Bye.
Bye.